Welcome to the Cross in the Desert, speaking hope and freedom to Iran. My name is Randy L. Noble. I'll be your host, and this is a program that is dedicated to speaking out and being a voice for my voiceless friends in Iran who suffer under the oppression and fear of the Islamic regime, which is a dictatorship in their lives. And so I've dedicated this program to speak out on those vital issues that my friends face every day living in Iran. So glad you could be with me on this edition of The Cross in the Desert. Tonight I want to focus in on a very, very important person, and she's a young, courageous girl that you've probably heard a lot about in the news. Her name is Malala Yousafzai. Malala Yousafzai just recently turned 16, and last year, when she was just 15, in October of 2012, she was shot and nearly killed by the violent terrorist group known as the Taliban in her home country of Pakistan. And the reason they shot Malala is because she was very outspoken about the right of education for every person in Pakistan. And of course the Taliban, who are fearlessly afraid of change in any way, and especially if it involves a woman, decided the best way to deal with her is to kill her. Well, if you know anything about this story, she miraculously survived this head wound. She was shot in the head and being transported back and forth from Pakistan to the United Kingdom. She is alive and well today and speaking out for the rights of children, for the rights of women, for education and freedom in Pakistan. Very, very impressive young girl and a very important speech that she recently gave. But on the topic of speeches, you and I have always had an opportunity to be inspired and motivated by a famous speech. You've probably heard one, maybe recently, maybe in the past decade. I can think about the powerful Gettysburg Address delivered by President Abraham Lincoln in 1863 during the bloody bloodbath of the Civil War, when he encouraged his weary troops to keep up the fight, to put down the oppression of the Southerns who were insisting on slavery and insisting on pushing that agenda. That bloody Civil War took its toll on both sides. And in the famous Gettysburg Address, President Lincoln talked about this bloody Civil War and then talked about the cost of freedom. And he talked about true government being of the people, by the people, and for the people. And those are famous phrases we're all aware of. That's part and parcel of the Gettysburg Address. That's a famous speech. Another famous speech, a few decades later, in 1962 or 63, I believe, the late President John F. Kennedy gave a speech that we probably have all heard quoted at one time or another. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. A very famous speech with an often quoted phrase saying we have a responsibility to not depend on government in our country, but to do something positive for our own country. And then, of course, we're all very familiar just a few months later when the late Dr. Martin Luther King stood on the Washington Mall in the blazing hot summer and uttered his famous speech, "I have a dream," dealing with the horrible racial period of that time. So there are famous speeches that all of us are very familiar with. But let me just add to those famous speeches. I heard a very important speech just a few days ago by Malala Yousafzai on her 16th birthday at the United Nations. As I listened to this brief 17-minute speech, I was moved to tears by this young, courageous girl who stood up for her people in Pakistan against the ugly, ugly terrorism that has taken place there. She said to the Taliban that the book and the pen is mightier than your gun. It's mightier than the sword, and it's true. And I want to read part of my blog to you. If you go to my Facebook page later on, you will see a YouTube video of this speech. I encourage you to watch it. If you go to my blog, The Cross in the Desert, the speech will be there, and also the video that I really encourage you to watch. But what I want to do now is to read what I wrote in this important blog entitled "One Book and One Pen Can Change the World." On July 12, 2013, on her 16th birthday, Malala addressed the United Nations Assembly in what I believe is one of the most courageous speeches I have ever heard. With her mother and father present, Malala, dressed in a beautiful pink and white hijab, stood at a podium, thanking everyone for their prayers and praising her doctors and nurses for her miraculous recovery. "I speak not for myself, but for those without a voice so they can be heard," Malala declared. She then recalled the frightening day when she was shot and made a bold declaration saying, quote, "They thought the bullet would silence us, but they failed. Out of that silence came thousands of voices." There was a rousing applause, and then Malala boldly proclaimed, "The terrorists thought they would change my aim and stop my ambition, but nothing changed except weakness, fear, and hopelessness died, and strength and courage was born. I don't hate the Taliban who shot me," she admitted. Malala credited Muhammad and Jesus for teaching her compassion, and her parents for impressing on her the importance of forgiveness. "Extremists are afraid of books and pens," Malala pointed out as she urged the governments of the world to help her wage war against illiteracy, poverty, and terrorism. Malala's goal is to ensure and protect the rights of every woman and every child across the globe through peace and education. "Let us take up our books and pens. They are our most important weapons." I really watched this speech in tears. I am so proud and inspired by this young girl's courage. When I think about the role models for teenagers today, Malala is the first person who comes to my mind. She literally is my hero. We need more role models like Malala. And I'm sorry, instead of the hip-hop celebrities who are busy promoting drugs and sex and leading many of our teens down to a road of ruin. After watching Malala's speech, I predict that one day she very well could be the next woman president of Pakistan. Malala Yousafzai, a very courageous woman. I want you to see a picture of her right here. And on that page it says, "I want to say to the world, you must try to get an education because it is very important." Malala says, if the new generation is not given pens, they will be given guns by the terrorists. So very, very true. In our last remaining minutes, I want to take the time and to talk about a very dear friend of mine and a friend of all Christians all over the world. His name is Saeed Abedini. He is an American-Iranian Christian pastor who is being held captive against his will in Evin prison in Iran. He's been there over 300 plus days. And during those 300 days, he has been beaten and tortured with the aim of the Iranian interrogators to cause him to recant his faith. During that time, he has suffered many, many horrible things, especially internal bleeding from all of the torture. He was denied medical care. But I want to thank God that all of our prayers have really been answered. Just recently, on January 20th, or July 20th, excuse me, Saeed was taken to a hospital in Tehran for treatment, and for the first time, he was examined by a physician and prescribed medication for injuries he sustained from the beatings he endured by prison guards. So there has been some real answer to prayer. He has been treated now for the first time for this serious internal bleeding. I'm really thankful. And his wife, Nagma Abedini, responded in a written statement to this latest breakthrough for her husband Saeed. She says, quote, "Thank you to all of the individuals who have prayed, written letters, signed petition, called government officials, run benefit races, tweeted and shared Saeed's story. Thank you to all the government officials from around the world who have stood for my husband. Iran has listened to your pleas. While I'm encouraged that Saeed is finally getting medical care, the fight is not yet over. It has been a difficult 300 days. 300 days of torment simply because Saeed loves Jesus Christ. I am hopeful Iran will do the just and honorable thing and release Saeed. You can get involved. You can come to my Facebook page and read the latest updates, or go to this website, Save Saeed. That is capital SAVESAEED, SaveSaeed.org, and sign the petition, letting your voice be heard to the ACLJ and all over the world to the government officials that Saeed must be unconditionally freed from Evin prison in Iran. I want to also mention that in just a few weeks on my Blog Talk live radio program, something recently I've just gotten involved in, my special guest will be Nagma Abedini, and she'll be also accompanied by Tiffany Barans from the ACLJ, and we're going to have a special time talking about the latest updates on Saeed, as well as the upcoming nationwide prayer vigil on September 26th. That's on the Cross in the Desert live Blog Talk Radio. It's going to be Thursday, August 15th, at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And there will be links up on my Facebook page. I will tweet this, and you'll be informed. You can listen in to the live broadcast or the rebroadcast as well. And that's on August 15th, a very special program coming up. I want to mention a few days before that, I have a very special program dealing with Iran's new president, Hassan Rouhani, his installation as the official new president of Iran. That program will be on the Cross in the Desert live Blog Talk Radio. It will be on the Red Fox Blogger Network. It will be on this Sunday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's Sunday, August 4th, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Those are some important events coming up. I want to end with quoting a scripture. It is a promise from God that is so applicable to all of our lives, but especially my friends in Iran. And I say this from my heart because the Lord has laid this particular scripture as hope for my friends in Iran who endure such hardship and hurting in so many levels, fear and oppression, and just dealing with the economy, with the sanctions against them. They're hurting people. And this is a promise God has given to me for them. It's from Psalm 72, verse 12. He will rescue the poor when they cry to him. He will help the oppressed who have no one to defend them. He feels pity for the weak and the needy, and he will rescue them. He will redeem them from oppression and violence, for their lives are precious to him. I have said this to my friends time and time again. I have chatted with them on Facebook and sent them emails, and I've quoted this verse to them in my blogs. God promises to hear their cries, to rescue and deliver them, to defend them. He promises he feels their pity and their need, and that he says he will redeem them from oppression because their lives are precious to them. And this is God's promise to not only you, but to my precious friends in Iran. I thank you so much for joining me on this edition of The Cross in the Desert. I will see you on the very next week. God bless you and have yourself a terrific week. See you then.